Resolute Square.
There was also maintained what was called an enemies list, which is rather extensive and continually being updated.
Democrats want Republicans dead.
Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?
The women with the least likelihood of getting pregnant are the ones most worried about having abortions.
On January 6th of 2021, you had tens of thousands of people peacefully protesting.
No, it's not a right-wing conspiracy theory. It's not QAnon. It's real.
I'm Rick Wilson, and this is The Enemies List. My guest today on The Enemies List is my old friend Al Cárdenas. Al is a guy who, like me, was a part of the Republican infrastructure. He was around the party and at so many different levels, including being the chairman of the party of the state of Florida in the days when it was really starting to take power. One of our favorite subjects, how Republican politics in Florida in particular has changed so radically. With that, Al, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the Enemies List today, and tell us where you see things with the Republican Party in the country right now, and how you see this primary playing out.
Oh my! Obviously, it's going to be a long runway, but when this thing started, I thought that Governor DeSantis was going to be a real challenger to Trump's base. I shouldn't have thought that if I was smart enough, but I that's what I thought, given his. And I was driven primarily by the indicators we used to in the old days go by, right? Money and polling numbers and all that. But I think today's analysis is quite a bit different, and the old indicators are not as indicative. And so when he launched this effort with all that money, and right after a pretty impressive win in Florida, I thought, well, here we go. It's a real horse race. And it didn't take too long to realize that, there's a group of people that were the base of the party, a new base, not the base you and I were used to, that comprised of people who were stupid, BS'd, or really not there, like the QAnon people. And there's no way he was going to break into that crowd if we thought about it carefully enough, and if we realized how many of them were. And so, can Trump grow from 30% of the base or 35% of the base to 30 or 28? Yeah, but he's not taking any more of that. And then his performance has been so lacking. I mean, Governor DeSantis' performance, that he's lost whatever ground he had. I don't see a way to come back. And so the way I see the Republican primary now, Rick, is that especially if Trump doesn't show up at the debate, is that everybody's going to be shooting to be number two. And so all of a sudden, Ron DeSantis is going to become the target, especially at that debate. And you're going to see Chris Christie and the others who are more aggressive begin to hone in on DeSantis as an interim step. And because, once you make it a two-person race or a three-person race, all the coverage changes, right? And all of the money changes. And so the second thing is, I don't know, I guess if the governor is smart enough, it happened on McCain, you can figure out how not to spend your money and try to endure. But there's no way he's not going to run out of money if he keeps spending money at a clip that he had been spending, because, the major donors are not going to open their wallet. That's kind of my look at it. So my question is, one, is DeSantis going to be deposed, or two? Yeah, and by whom? I don't think anybody's going to take that nomination from Trump at this point. And so you and I better do a good job.
Yeah, we better, because I think he was always sort of inevitable. And there is a question that I've had for a long time about, like, does DeSantis have the skills to do this? I mean, you and I both come out of Bush world, and we saw that Jeb, who had been a very, very, very successful governor in Florida and a very good conservative leader in Florida, just didn't have that like thing on the national stage, that mojo on the national stage.
Right.
That, you hate him or not, Trump has, a presence on the stage.
Right. And he has two things. He's been voted for 2 election cycles in a row. And if there's one thing people hate is to admit they're wrong, right? And most people. And so I think the fact that people have voted for him twice gives them an incentive. It's hard for them to, after all the crap they've talked at Thanksgiving dinners, to roll it back and say, well, I was wrong. And then the second part of it is people have a penchant to want to belong to a tribe. That has been going on since civilization started, right? And so now, for better or for worse, they feel they're part of Trump's tribe. They feel they're part of MAGA. And so I think those are the two factors that are unlikely to separate Trump's voters from Trump.
I think that's very on point. And look, I mean, like I was saying, we come out of the sort of the Bush world in a lot of ways. You were chairman of the party from 99 to 2003 and 40, and that was a fundamental, pivotal time for the growth of the party here. And I don't think a lot of people realize. They always think, "Oh, Florida's so crazy." We weren't really, when Jeb and the Republicans were growing so quickly in Florida during your tenure. It wasn't. There was some crazy on the very edges, but it wasn't as much of the QAnoners and the conspiracy theory people and all the real nuts driving the party. And those people just love Trump. They're not going to walk away from that, right? I mean, they're just locked into that.
Well, in the party, when I was chairman, we had about 10, 15% of the crazies, right, on the committees, because, to be a volunteer and spend all your time on something takes a special personality. And it was, I had folks on committees who would handle complaints. And as I said, people are tribal. Nobody wants to get kicked out of anything. And so that helped me keep people at bay. But now that 10% of crazies is 90% of most executive committees. And so, there's been it's a combination of factors. Now they've been trying hard to get on the committees, Trump supporters. And number two, those who are not that way don't want to be involved in that toxic atmosphere, so they leave. And so that's where we are. But you and I are never present as much as people pursue. We've never been present to an atmosphere when one person totally takes over the party at grassroots like this guy has.
Sure. I mean, look, even when Jeb or Rick Scott was governor, there were plenty of different factions of people who had different interests, and they weren't. And at the base voters were not like, oh my God, I'll set myself on fire if you don't do everything for Jeb or Rick or whoever.
Right.
And certainly not for Charlie. But with Trump, it is sort of that, like, if you don't back him, we're going to abandon the party. It's like he's almost got like a suicide pact with these people.
Well, it's a tribe or a cult, whatever you want to call it. And I don't think it's the majority of the party at this point, but it's a controlling aspect of the party because they're that way. And so we'll see. How this thing is rearranged, Rick. You may have better instincts than I do, but Trump is our nominee, and at this point, I think he is. And if he loses, which at this point I hope that's the case, we'll see how long people are willing to stand in line for MAGA.
Yeah, that's a really big question. I think one of the questions that somebody when I was doing some prep for the show, we were talking about, like, when you were chairman, and for a long time, we worked really hard in Florida to win over Hispanic voters in the state. They're a crucial aspect of any coalition in the state. It seems like that the Democrats in the state sort of walked away from them. And I think it's one of those questions that Democrats really need to ask themselves, like, how do we fix this problem?
Well, here's their look. When we were able to gain the majority, yes, we had an effort which superseded the Democrats' effort in fundraising and activity and volunteer work, and in recruiting people that were electable in those districts. But it would have never happened had the Democrats not been in a downfall all on their own. If you remember, the Democrats, with majorities could pass a reapportionment, could pass a congressional or legislative map, right? And so we took it to the courts, and things changed and made it more advantageous. That's bad on them. I mean, that was, I think, one of the beginning efforts of their decline. The second is, not dealing with middle America, Florida, and forgetting that Florida is comprised of three geographies, right? The hardcore conservatives, Midwestern moderates, and South Florida's minority communities. And so they didn't take care of all three communities. They lost but I would say Democrats were as responsible as we were for our ascendancy and our majority. And now, if you look at what's going on now and what the legislature is passing, what DeSantis is doing, you would think that Democrats would be rolling it in. But they don't have resources. They don't have a bench. They're not doing well in recruiting. They're recruiting people. They're not bad people, but they're not the right people for the districts they're recruiting them for. And so, they've lost the fact that they need to win with the moderates, center-left people in certain districts, but that's not the people they're supporting. And I've seen it time and time again. And so, whether or not Democrats can put Florida in play again, it's more up to them than to anything else. We're giving them the leeway to do that, but they don't seem to be taking advantage of it.
Right. If the opportunity is there, they just need to convert on it. You mentioned something twice now, and I think it's really important we talk about that for a second about Florida, is picking the right candidates for the right districts. And that was one thing the Republicans in the pre-Trump era, we were very good at finding people. If it was a South Florida person, they were going to be from the right community. They were going to have the right values. They were going to be, if it was a more moderate place like Palm Beach, they were going to be maybe pro-choice even. We we wanted the majority. We didn't just want like a cookie cutter. But now you're right. I think the Democrats really have to work on that, like finding the right people for the right seat. That really was part of the secret sauce when you were chairman and during the time that the Republicans were growing so fast in Florida.
Well, now we've got living proof. Probably Florida's map is going to have to be redone based on the Supreme Court's decision. Democrats will have a chance at one more seat, maybe two, but in the state legislature, quite a few. And frankly, there are probably 7 or 8 seats in the state legislature that Republicans won in 2022 and that are easily winnable back. But if you start looking at who they're recruiting, you say to yourself, those people may not be bad people, but I don't see the match with the districts they're being recruited for. And because you have now a nucleus of leadership in the Democrat Party that's not center-left, but really left, they're picking people who fit their own profiles or their own interests rather than people who are elected. I think, I'm looking at the Democrats, I'm saying, boy, what a wasted opportunity to regain a number of seats and become competitive again.
Again, the Democratic Party, as you point out, there's a lot of different Democratic parties in the state. South Florida Democrats are very, very, very different than everybody north of I-4. And so I think that's very, very on point. So, we've talked a little bit about how the party changed here and how Trump is sort of dominating the party. And I go back again because, we're both from Bush world in the before times, as I like to say. I think you agree probably it's going to take a complete like nuclear meltdown of MAGA and to bring back that kind of Republican Party, which I think is sort of where we're both from.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think under current leadership, cultural wars will be predominant, and the things that we used to talk about, issues that made a difference in Florida are not. I mean, one of the reasons we won is people liked what we had to say more than what they had to say. I'm not sure that's the case. One of the things that really, and I know I'm dumping on Democrats, but trying to help them out in some way.
Right. Tough love.
One of the things that really concerns me is, look, we're taking positions, the Republican legislature, that are not necessarily popular with the average voter in Florida, such as immigration, such as, higher hourly wages, things that today in Florida resonate, right? And now the Democrats, what do? They get back into a culture war. All they want to talk about is abortion. All they want to talk about, they're matching us step for step in cultural wars rather than making a difference by taking positions on issues that the people in Florida will be more favorable to them than to us. This censorship stuff, this stuff that's going on in higher education, that falls right in the lap of the Democrats. But you think, what are they doing? Instead of talking more globally about it, so it's, the rights of, those with different sexual persuasions and all that. I'm all for that, but that's not where the voters are. The voters are for censorship. The voters are for letting universities educate. The voters are for stuff that you should be talking about, not just fighting the cultural wars with the Republicans step by step. And so I just think that the Democrats are led primarily by a philosophical group that's not representative of Middle Florida. And that's part of their challenge, I think.
I mean, to me, it's like, if I were the Democrats, if I were advising them, I would be beating the doors down on rent and housing prices that are through the roof. I'd be beating the doors down on property insurance, the crisis of property insurance and the climate crisis we're having. I mean, you're down there in the heartbeat of where if we have a major storm or a climate crisis stuff, you're going to be on the front line of that. And I think there are millions of Floridians who are in that same spot where, Ron DeSantis better pray to heaven there's not a bad storm this year, because we are not ready. And it's an issue. I think if the Democrats were smart, they would be converting on that.
And, the crisis is going to be augmented by the fact that thousands of Floridians now, based on the cost of property insurance, have to choose between losing their home and going naked on property insurance. So the costs are going to be the same, but now the cost to the homeowners are going to be disproportionately higher. And if I was a Democrat, I'd run just on that, just as you said. It's really impacting every Floridian.
It really is. So, Al, thank you so much for joining us on the Enemies List today. I really appreciate your time. It's been great to catch up on a little bit of where we've been, where we're going. And, as this race continues to progress on, I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Me too. I'd love to spend a little more time on the presidential options with you when we have some more time.
We as the field clarifies, we're going to have you back because, as always, Florida will be the big battleground. Thanks again for listening to the Enemies List. If you have any comments, questions, or if there's someone you'd like to hear on the podcast, hit me up on Twitter @TheRickWilson. Thanks again for the wonderful support you've shown the pod. We're growing fast. It really helps if you will share this with your friends, your family, and anyone else who, like us, is trying to save democracy. While you're at it, if you could rate and review the podcast, I would be very much appreciative. I know this is the sort of thing you've heard a billion times. Please rate, review, like, blah, blah, blah. But you need to do it. It really does help us a lot. We are slaves to the algorithm, my friends. And if you do this, it will help get the pod out further. Anyway, thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time. And remember, whatever you do, stay off the list.